Aren't they beautiful? Orchids are one of the most searched for plants on the internet. In fact, across the world there are more than 487,000 searches for information on this plant every month. And if you pop in the word orchids into Google, you'll have more than 215 million results to go through. So when something special happens to your orchid, whether it's flowers or foliage or roots, you want to understand what it means for this plant and how to grow it. For any new orchid owners and for those who are looking to buy another orchid, what are the key facts that you need to know about this plant? Well, first off, there are many varieties of orchid and they come in a variety of shapes, colours and sizes, and more often than not you'll see Phalaenopsis, otherwise known as the moth orchids, as a popular variety with its lovely long stems, many flowers that display around the stem and look slightly moth-like as if they're in flight. Other popular varieties include Cymbidium that have strong flower heads, and Dendrobiums whose flowers grow right from the base all the way up the stems.
Not all orchids live in the ground. Some of them are in fact epiphytes.
This means that they grow on the side of other plants and trees, and they're not reliant on the plant for nutrients. No, they're not a parasite. Instead, they use their roots, and they've evolved not only to hold on to the other plant but also to contain chlorophyll. Now this allows them to photosynthesize, so the roots photosynthesize just like the leaves. So if you've ever wondered why orchids are sold in clear plastic pots, that's the reason. They need the light.
Cymbidium orchids, now they grow in the ground, not on trees, so they're sold in dark containers so you can put them inside a pot cover in your own home.
But the easiest way to tell whether you've got an epiphyte or not is the transparency of the pot. They don't like a lot of water, just the equivalent of a spoonful of water, just to keep them moist. Never let them sit in water themselves. And always use natural rainwater to water orchids. In terms of temperature, a nice 19 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit, if you prefer, is a good temperature to keep them at. Now keep them in a spot that gets just enough sunlight. They don't like direct sunlight, so either in an easterly or westerly windowsill is best. Sometimes it may seem confusing when new growth starts to appear on orchids because you're not really sure whether it's an aerial root or whether it's a stem. It's best to wait a while. Be patient. Let your orchid grow so you can clearly see whether it's a root or whether it's a new flower spike which is coming up, which needs to be staked and grow upright. Growing spikes are greener in colour than roots, with many new roots usually rounder and thicker and slightly white in colour, and it depends on variety. If the new growth isn't an aerial root or a straightforward flower spike, you may be lucky enough to have one of these growing. Look at that. It's called a Keiki. That's K-E-I-K-I. And they're little baby plants growing on the stem of the parent plant. But why is this happening? Well, in the wild, orchids are reproduced by pollination, producing seed, or division much of the time. This is because the plant grows so big that parts of it snap off or being taken by birds for nests, and then they land on a tree or a rock and carry on the growing cycle. On mature orchids grown as houseplants, especially Phalaenopsis, these are prone to producing babies in this way. However, in some instances, they appear mainly because the plant is stressed or whether the plant feels it's at risk. So by producing a baby, it's a natural way of passing on the genes. Then, due to this method of reproduction, the baby will be identical to the parent plant, unlike seed where there could be a slight variety. If you think that the orchid is stressed, check the plant is getting a stable and suitable temperature of at least 19 degrees Celsius, that's 66 degrees Fahrenheit. And that it's getting sufficient light by positioning it in a spot where bright light is there but slightly filtered, and also making sure there's plenty of water but not too much. The secret is little and often. There are a couple of options if you have one of these Keikis growing on your houseplant. Either cut them off so the moisture and nutrients and energy can go straight into the parent plant, or you can allow the keiki to mature and grow, as I've done this one here, before you take it off and plant it separately in another pot. If you're choosing to nurture the baby orchid and eventually plant it up, it's best to wait until the roots that are there are about 3 to 7 centimeters long. By this point, there should also be plenty of leaves that are growing as well, as you can see on this one here. When this is the case, use a clean knife to cut 2 to 3 centimeters down from the flower spike here, from the parent plant. So I'll be cutting it round about there. A top tip for this process is to sprinkle some cinnamon powder into the wound from where the cut has been done, especially on the mother orchid, because it acts as a natural fungicide. The little baby plant can then be potted up in peat-free orchid potting compost. Keep the newly potted baby in a spot out of direct sunlight and mist every few days. I would suggest that you use rainwater or distilled water to get best results. Whilst they're younger, the baby plants will need slightly less light, but more humidity, really, to get them growing.
It can take around 2 to 3 years for flowers to bloom on the keiki, but every plant is different. Mine, a few months later, as you can see, I've got a flower stem already appearing. When this happens, you need to make sure there's energy for this new plant to flower. First of all, you can cut off the flower, allowing energy to develop its root system, or you can leave it connected to the mother plant so it uses the mother plant's own energy. The roots on mine at this time are not established enough for me to cut the baby plant off the mother plant, so I'm going to leave the keiki on this parent plant. But it does mean the energy is being sapped from the parent plant, so it's unlikely that it's going to flower in the near future.
Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and share. And for more great videos like this, please subscribe. And also let me know about your experience with orchids in the comments below. And for more great information, visit my website, daviddomoney.com.